Okay, hi, welcome to the Citizens Advisory Board meeting for February 6th. Should we go through who's on the line, Sabrina, or just go ahead and get started with reviewing the agenda?
So I'm going to confirm who we have for attendance purposes for the CAC. And if there's anyone that I missed, please put a message in the chat. So I have Celeste as here for the meeting, Mr. J, Lindsay, Dr. Marco, and then William Wood, and myself. Is there anyone else that I've missed from CAC? If so, please list your information in the chat.
Okay. All right, so for the agenda, we're going to go through the minutes to approve them from last time, and then we'll go to public comment, then board member comment, and senior leadership comments. And then the policy committee update will be Celeste, and then we'll go through the policy discussion. And then if there's time, we'll go to recruitment of new members and then open comments for future board meeting assignments. So as far as the approval for the January 17 minutes, is there a motion to approve?
Will raise his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not showing up. I have way too many things open. Okay. All right.
I second.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. And then do we have public comment?
If so, please write your name in the chat, and then we'll be able to unmute you.
Okay. No one for public comment? Okay. All right. So we'll go next to board member comments.
Good evening, all. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you all for persevering and coming out this evening. Be virtual. I want to send my best wishes and prayers to all those who are not well, who are sick, who are injured. We kind of had all three happen to us, to our community today, and that was really wild. And so, just so the public knows that we switched to virtual in this quick format because we had some of our members. Our chairman was unwell. We had some of our senior leadership also was unwell, and we had senior members who were taking care of family who were hurt. So it was a lot happening to us today. We're persevering and we're here. We thank everybody for tuning in and following up with us. We're excited for moving forward for this year, and just want to also remind the public that this will be the board will be in totality. Today was kind of because of just happenstance, but before going forward, the board itself will be virtual because we're getting work done in the major boardroom. We do look to be out in the community with our listening sessions, and we will be out in the community with at least one of our board meetings. Hopefully we can find a little place to meet at. But we want to get in touch with you. We want to connect with you. So we're not shying away. We're just trying to find a way to get to you the best way we can. So please email us. Please keep a hold of us. Keep in contact with us. We thank you for all of your engagement. And so let's get started.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you for the comment in the chat. We're glad that you're here attending. So next, anything for senior leadership comments? Nope. Okay. All right. So
Lindsay, is senior leadership, is it the president of the CAC? Is it me or?
I'm not sure.
That would be you, Dr. Marco. Yeah, it would be you. Yes.
Okay, just I didn't want to step in where I didn't belong. I just much like Mr. J, I appreciate everybody's willingness to adapt quickly and move to virtual and participating this evening. So thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing the conversation this evening.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Celeste, do you want to go over the policy committee updates?
Sure. So everybody can hear me, right? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. We met on January 24th, and I guess one of the biggest changes is that the Board of Education members changes their committee assignments sometimes, and so David Bass was on the committee up through December, and now Nancy Allen has joined the committee. So that's a new change. So I got to meet her, and so she is part of the committee along with Ray Gallagher and Dean Rose. So that was important for you guys to know too. So last time we talked, somebody had asked a question about, I'm sorry, hold on. I'm looking through my notes right now too. Why we had gotten rid of policy, policy 40. I'm so sorry, you guys. It was right here a minute ago. I'll come back to that one. I'll just start with 200 because that was the redistricting one, and that was a huge topic at our meeting last time we met as a committee. Dr. Lebo presented first, and he talked about the process to focus on the quantitative measures per board request, but also that the feeling of the community was they had a concern about the lack of focus on the student well-being, the mental health issues that we had discussed as our committee too, consistency in academics and all the support measures, and also maintaining the demographics of your population when you're trying to, reorganize a population. Dr. Lebo said it was not their intent to sound like that, that they were trying to get rid of that as a priority. And he is going to take that feedback and bring information from his team to hopefully rework some things for our next meeting, in the policy meeting, which would be February 28th. I did convey all of our concerns. So I'm actually keeping my personal notes to go back and forth. I just have a running document so I can go back to what we talked about last time. And then I take my policy notes there too. But that was the feedback that we had. Like I said, John had given us a lot of good comments on that policy 200. I know he was involved with that, and his community had given him feedback as well. So right now, 200, which is the redistricting, is kind of we're waiting until the end of February, and we'll meet and discuss that further. Does anybody have anything about that one? I did include in my comments everything that we had discussed as a group. The discussion was very, and sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
No, I don't have anything. Go ahead.
Okay. The thing is about redistricting, and I wanted to bring this up to you guys, is that it really is a numbers game, because you are looking at a population where you might have a building that's 150%. That's crowded, and I don't want my kid in a classroom full of 60 kids, right? So I know it's a numbers game, and the policies really drive those things. However, I'm sticking with our feeling that also the policy drives the priorities that are communicated through the regulations and what is actually carried out there. And I think there was such an overwhelming feedback of when those words were taken out, that, the more the quantitative things are in there, the numbers and the timing, but the qualitative things, some of the softer language was removed. And I think that did not hit the public well. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Dr. Lebo brings back from his team at the end of February for that one.
I'll just make a comment there that it didn't hit me well either. So I'll say that, and so that I made that known at the board meeting. Also, I wanted to highlight what you just said. You mentioned before that just now you mentioned that the regulation drives policy, and so that is really big. And something I've been trying to, as you guys know, being senior members of the committee, I was trying to drive home to our committee from the beginning that working with the policy is actionable. It is it gets into the everyday work we do in the county, and it is important. And that we're now taking actions that speak to what happens in the buildings. So your voices are being heard in how we drive policy, which makes regulation, which goes towards the everyday function of the school building. So I'm just really excited to see that transition happen. And this is what we were trying to get to for a long time. So I want to thank you all for persevering once again for that. You did mention that members change. Because of where we are and how we were just getting, our wheels turning with this committee, I requested to stay with the committee so that I can kind of see it through during my term. And so I'm really hoping that this, momentum continues to go forward. So thank you so much for that comment. So.
Thank you. And thanks for sticking with us too. Okay, we discussed, let's see. We talked about 305. Dr. Sergo came in and this was the discussion about a conflict of interest with staffing. And if you are, if you're a classroom teacher, you cannot get paid to tutor one of your own students. Okay, so that's the basic gist of how that works. It also relates to sporting events and coaching and summer camps that they might run, but also non-athletic events, like say, a violin player gets free lessons from tutoring time with their teacher. So they're talking a lot more about that policy, which is 305. And that's going to be added to the February 28th meeting for more discussion as well. We had talked about all of those kind of together in a bundle. So we're going to continue that grouping, I think, as we move along in our discussions. We did not talk a lot about that in this committee last time. Does anybody have anything with that they wanted to discuss? I'm pretty comfortable with the way the wording in the direction that it's going. I did bring up 2 meetings ago about an example, because there's a lot of things, especially in summer events, where, the staff member can do whatever they want on their own time. But I think that we want to make sure the policy protects them as well, so that a conflict of interest is not perceived when there isn't one. So we've had those discussions, and I do appreciate the richness of that discussion. And then that is, everyone's best interests are going to be reflected in that policy. So I like that discussion. I don't see any issue. I mean, I think that's pretty cut and dry, just a matter of narrowing down the final wording.
Just a question for you. Did they mention anything in terms of, I'm trying to remember which meeting I was in when we discussed that and what I can and cannot say, but I wanted to ask about the discussion you guys had on that policy. Well, would anything come up in terms of the retrospect of a sports educator versus a classroom educator?
We discussed, can you give me like an example?
So essentially, I believe my concern with that policy as it was written was that a teacher who's teaching like, chemistry, they are not able to, tutor their student after the fact and receive income from that. However, someone who's a baseball coach could, have a camp and quote unquote tutor their student, in physical activity, and that was allowed. And so I really took issue with the fact that we had teachers, because physical education is a knowledge, it's a passed on skill. It's knowledge. It's just like chemistry, just like biology. You can teach physical education, you can teach kinesthetics. And so teachers of the physical arts are not restricted from, receiving payment from their students to learn more about that skill, versus teachers of academic work are restricted. And so I had a real big problem. You're right here, another problem again when it comes up, that we're hampering some teachers from taking income from their skill with students versus others. So I'd see it more uniform, because if I have a kinesthetic skill, I can teach a student and get paid. But if I have an academic skill, I cannot, and that's not fair. So that's kind of my you'll hear me make that point again later on. So I just want to see that came up. I mentioned it before. I want to see if they carried it on in that meeting. So I have to go look at the notes myself, but I will bring it up again. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that was a major issue that we discussed about that. Not so much the academics versus the athletics or the other extracurriculars, like we mentioned the music department, for example. But we talked a lot about sporting events, and actually I kind of made everybody laugh. It was my second or third meeting, and I was like, all right, I need to give an example here. And I talked about the honors bowling team, because we don't have a bowling team in Frederick County Public Schools. So I wanted to give an example without, using a regular sport that we actually have. But we talked about how, you're the head bowling coach of the honors bowling team, and you have this summer camp and you're hosting it and people are paying you and you're coaching them. And then you're also in charge of deciding who makes the team at your high school. Yeah. So that is what we talked about. And so that's where I'm waiting for the wording. Yes. And the perception, and also like what is allowed. I mean, I know a lot of
that was my secondary problem. Yeah. What you're saying there.
Yeah. You need to be able to make money on your own time, and so the discussion was also brought up, if you are on school grounds versus not on school grounds, if it's not during school time. So I really want to see the red line version, which should be out, I think, around the 23rd of February, to see where that's going and if that is clear cut enough.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it is a sticky one. So, it wasn't ready. We talked a lot about the out of season events. MSS PSSA, did I add an extra S in there? I'm not sure. The Maryland State Sports Association that we all play within as a school system, also has documents governing this exact situation that we're discussing. And so Dr. Sergo was going to refer to that and asked, and that is something that we do talk about too with our coaches and our athletic directors. I think they do talk about that, and I think that our policy right now is congruent with the state guidelines. Mr. Blivis, who is our chief legal counsel, commented that there is concern that the summer athletic camps can have that feeling that you have to participate to make the team in the fall or spring or whatever. Or it could affect the students' participation on the team.
Was there a discussion about bringing those that long acronym into our policy, kind of grafting some of those words into our policy?
Well, yeah, Dr. Sergo was going to go back, but she said our policy is congruent with the state guidelines right now, which is, I think, maybe where we sort of worded our policy to begin with. So she was going to bring that back to the discussion as well.
Okay, yeah, I asked them before to bring that MSAA stuff in. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, no, so that'll be February 28th. And like I said, by the 23rd, we should have a red line copy on the agenda, which is the policy committee agenda, which is in board docs. So, and I got to say, I love the red line version, and there's blue and purple too sometimes. And so it really gives you a good blueprint for where it's been, where it's coming, what's been added. And also there's a lot like literally red lines through what we're getting rid of. Super, super helpful, especially if you're joining the discussion in the middle because you want to see what's going on. Go there. And the agenda is so clear cut. Just look for the red line version. Anything else about that one? You guys think about that too. Our meeting's not till the 28th. So if we come up with something else, I noted to again reiterate with the state guidelines for the athletic events.
Great. That was super helpful. Thank you.
All right, cool. Okay. I'm sorry.
There's a question in the chat.
And so public questions, thank you for sharing the question, and we need to continue with our meeting with our members of the meeting, and we may be able to address some public questions at the end, but normally public questions are not part of the meeting. It's just the people that are members of the committee.
Okay.
But we can take your question and get back to you. If you also put your email in the chat, what we'll do is we'll take your question and we'll get you an answer. So we're not saying no, we're just saying not this time.
Okay, so the next hot spot for us, we've been waiting for this, is the 400 series of policy. Policy 404. Lindsay, did you have is this related to the PowerPoint that you put together?
Yes. So I can I steal the screen from you,
I was
Sabrina?
gonna say, just stop me and do like, yeah, put whatever out there, and I'll add in as we go if you want.
What I did is I just pulled up the policies and then what we had gotten so far. There's only like a couple comments, so I can share it. Hopefully, hold on one second. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Do you have a way to enlarge it? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the policy. And then this is just where I was going to make comments. This is John's comment so far regarding the same policy on student discipline is 403.
Okay. So 403 was rights and responsibilities, right? And so we have not discussed that as a policy committee. So this is a good time for us to discuss 403 also, just because I think 403 and 408 are going to come up at the next meeting. So we have not done either one of those yet.
Okay. Do you want to start with 403?
Sure.
Do I have the correct thing up then?
Yes.
Because it says student discipline. 408 is suspension and expulsion. 407 is removal of student from school area.
Yes. Can I go to 407?
Yeah. You can
Okay,
do
that was the one that I was looking for in my notes, but I was going out of order. My notes are in numerical order, but I wanted to jump ahead because we had a question about 407 being decommissioned. The rules are not going away. It just didn't make sense to have it as policy 407. We are going to include it in regulation 400-98, which is student attendance. Okay. So if you look under regulations and go to 400-98, you'll find it. The new statement is going to read up there that no person shall sign out or visit a student without legally being allowed to do so. That is the wording that's proposed. So we're going to talk about that again at the next one, but that is what is on the table for right now. It was redundant, and the way the student removal, like the whole language thing just sounded to a lot of us like, I don't know, there's a student in danger or causing danger, and, you know, someone has to come in, and it really just addresses who is allowed to visit and remove a student from school. Like, can I take my child out of school? Or can I go and have lunch with my child? And basically it follows the law. If you have, you know, a legal right to visit or, you know, take your child out of school, then, you know, that paperwork's going to be on file and it will be allowed by the administration of the school. So that is really where that is. They're not getting rid of any rules or policies. It just didn't make sense to have it where it was.
Okay, because I thought it said in the policy analysis form that it was going to be decommissioned, but you're saying that it's a regulation.
Yes.
Where it already has all that written in the regulation, and then they're just getting rid of the policy because it's redundant.
Yeah, it is redundant, and because it just follows the law. I mean, it's not like FCPS is making up a different, we're not creating our own policy for that. We're following the law. Like when John and I analyzed the copyright policy back in the early fall or maybe even late spring, and we did talk, when we talked to Mr. Blivis, that's the first time we met him. And basically we were like, well, we're not going to change it because it's following a law. So FCPS has nothing to say about we're not going to change the law, or, you know, we can make things more, I don't know, more conservative if we wanted to add rules to what the law already states, but we can't change what the law says. And so the move from the 407 decommissioned as a right, as a policy, it's stated already in a regulation.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I think it sounded a little bit like, wait, what do you mean you're decommissioning? Like, that sounds like we're just canceling that one.
Yeah.
And
He's like, okay,
it's not canceled. It's just put in a more appropriate place, I think.
okay. Do you want to go back to 403 then?
Sure. Yes.
And then I think this was the comment from John that he shared since he wasn't able to be here.
Can you read it or maybe make it a little bit bigger? I'm so sorry. Like,
No, that's okay.
I've got it. Yeah, I can maybe make mine bigger too. I don't know. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
I can only speak from his comment on from a parent lens that my daughter's has said as much to me, complaining that sometimes it's hard to get things done when kids are acting out of sorts. But that's just one. So
Now, speaking as a parent, I completely agree. Yes.
So I think the evidence-based or peer-reviewed practice piece is, I think, important as far as pulling it back to research, I guess. And then also, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the regulation, is there a regulation related to this at all?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the thing about 403 and 408 too is that we have the whole student code of conduct as well. So like I said, we have not talked about 403 or 408 yet. Rather than, I think 2 meetings ago, we just said, hey, this is gonna come up, but it did not, it'll come up at the end of February. So yeah, there are regulations. And again, there's student code of conduct that, you know, covers how those things are carried out every year.
I just wonder how it relates if the student has like a 504 plan or an IEP. You know, I think it.
Yeah, I would have to look at the regulations, but I think that all of that would also be covered in those as well as the student's IEP or 504, which would, yes.
Dr. Marco?
There are strict federal guidelines that govern the discipline of students with IEPs and 504s. So whatever Frederick County adopts, it would have to be aligned with those established legislation, laws, whatever you like to call it.
Mm-hmm.
IDA.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, is there anything specific? I appreciate John's comment, and it seems like it's, you know, a popular feeling here, at least with us too. Are there specific things that we want to address? I don't know what's going to happen until I see that red line version, because I'm curious about where we're going to go with this discussion. But for our purposes, you know, I definitely feel that feedback from him and from us here. So are there specific things that we want to see discussed, reworded, rethought out?
I mean, I would be curious what role like data plays in this as far as for the students and, you know, and so I just think there should be data, because I think it starts to get what's the word? Anecdotal. And I think that developing policy from an anecdotal place is can be, you know, worrisome. So I think that evidence-based piece that he mentioned is important, as well as just, you know, what kind of data that they have they're using to develop these policies on the disruptive behavior. Like, those are, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. I can tell you that these meetings are definitely very numbers and data driven. So I'm sure that will come up. I don't know how deep we're going to dive into what studies we're talking about, but I know that Mr. Falls, who is, and I am not 100% on his title. I believe he's the director of student services.
He is the director of student services. Yes, that's correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So he's been here and he'll be around for a lot of these as well. And he knows the student code of conduct like the back of his hand for sure. So I like hearing from him because, I mean, again, this is his area. So at the policy committee, the people who are running these different areas that are relevant to the policy come and they present from their staff. I mean, they're the ones that are the expert on that subject. So it's a great time to ask questions, and then they go back with our feedback, and then they go back to their team, and then they bring it back the next meeting, which is why it takes, a while for all of these discussions to happen. But any questions that we have for them, or things, comments that I can take back, we will. And after we meet, then I'll let you guys know where that discussion went. But I'll definitely add in our comments so far.
Is there anyone that participates in the meetings from on this particular policy from like a behavioral health or kind of mental health perspective?
So that's so in this situation, it's Mr. Falls, and that's his area of expertise. And under his team he's over all of student services. So that's definitely going to cover all of that as well. So he knows what happens on the discipline side. He knows what happens in the mental health side, and he's got all of that. So he brings all of that to the table.
Okay.
Yep. And there's us.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments or questions?
So from 403, I've got John's comments, which we pretty much nodded in agreement, and a question about where the data comes from that drives the wording of the policy. And we're looking for the evidence-based piece that John had asked about. So that's what I'm going to ask about.
Okay. Yep.
I always find a way to work it in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. They liked my bowling story. I don't think I did as well last time.
No, you're doing a great job, I'm sure. We appreciate you doing it on our behalf. So
thank you. It is really, I never thought I would be as I don't know, passionate about policies as I am. I mean, what I used to do in my career in higher ed certainly was policy driven, but I never thought I would be in this position, but I really love it. So I appreciate getting to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's perfect. I mean, this is really important. So
it is. So what do we had,
let's see, 404.
Okay.
So this was the student rights and responsibilities.
Yeah, so Mr. Falls presented on that. This was our first discussion on that policy, and his basic point was, we have the rights and responsibilities and the student code of conduct and the handbook. And so the main part of this policy, as he presented, was how the rights and responsibilities are communicated. So we did discuss, I'm curious to see what he brings back. We did talk about how they're communicated. I know some schools play trivia games to get their staff and students to learn about the different things, like rules and things that they have to go with. Some hand out a paper copy. Sometimes it's online and paper. It's always communicated annually. Ms. Allen had asked about, I guess, putting more of a timeline on it, like communicated within the first month or the first week of school. But we did discuss how since every school does things a little bit differently, we didn't want to tie their hands to, you know, a countywide thing that may not work in all schools. So we talked about that.
Okay. I think I had clicked on something. Let me see. Is it this? No. There was some place where I thought, and maybe I had clicked on the wrong thing, where it was that there were a lot of linked policies that looked like they were really old, some of them. So
yes,
my suggestion had been to not link them unless they had been reviewed recently. I think I clicked on something and it was like 2006 was the last update. So
yes. And that's exactly why we're doing the 400s right now. So I think it was the November meeting that Mr. Blivis had brought this big Excel spreadsheet color coded, and we went through all the policies and we went by time. And so that's why we're in the 400s now, because some of these are the very oldest ones we have on record. So as we update them, he's also reformatting too to make things easier so you can see all the linked policies. And one of them that we discussed, and I cannot remember which one it was, but I'm sure it's the one you were looking at. It probably had 30 or 40 different policies. Yes. And that's going to stay because they want everyone to have access quickly so that you can see what policies are related and what is specifically brought up in that wording, rather than you having to go back to the whole policy index and find it yourself.
I think that makes sense, but some of the ones that were linked were really old. And I think that would make me concerned that it has conflicting information on what might be appropriate now.
Yeah.
Since, at least 15 years ago, some of them. So
yes. Well, these are some of the oldest ones we have right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anybody else have anything?
No, I just can concur with your concern about the age of the policies, and that was actually very big for our previous president, President Johnson. She was really big on getting us through those, which is why we're in this mode right now, and that I think that's carrying on with the current presidency. I think President Yoho also had the same passion, and the borders as well. So I think going forward, you won't see such stagnation with the policies. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I did notice in the proposed budget a request for a staff member to actually be focused more on policy in the budget that's being discussed right now.
Wishful thinking.
I think that we have to put it all out there. So anyway, I saw the line.
We do. But unfortunately, we have to. I'm sober about the budget. I'm very sober about the budget. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough discussion, but anyway, it is recognized by our staff, our senior staff, that we need to keep pushing forward, and I know everyone's doing the best they can, and because of the policy on policies, which we've also discussed recently, we have to do it in a certain way. So we're just trying to add these together and make sure the relevant ones are discussed as a group so that we can, bundle those together and then move forward.
Okay, perfect. And then I think we just had one left. I think this one. Suspension and expulsion.
Yes.
Oh, no.
That's going to come up at the next one also.
Okay.
So I don't have a report on that.
We didn't get any comments from anybody on this one.
Okay.
So I don't know if we just want to go through it quickly.
I'm curious about this discussion that we're going to have about this one. We did, this was January. So the December meeting that we had, I believe we kind of glossed over the 400 policies that we're discussing right now. So 403, 404, 407, 408, I think. And And so they had talked about in-school suspension, and the definition of suspension is actually suspending student services and academic services. So suspension means, if you're suspended, you go home, you don't get to make up the work, and you're out. Like you're out for the day, right? In-school suspension, if you use that word, is supposed to mean the same thing, except you are in the building. So I think that's going to come up for discussion, because I really, and we discussed, in reality, are they sitting in a room doing nothing all day? They're probably doing schoolwork. So the word suspension may not be appropriate in this policy, or for that specific action, which is 403.3, I think, 408.3.
Mhm.
That'll probably have to come back to a discussion and looking at what Comar has in
Yeah.
terms of policy. I think in Comar they do, off my vague top of my head, I believe there is they can count that as suspension for in-school suspension. I think that can count. And even when a kid goes home for suspension, I have seen work, go home with a student, if
Yeah.
they're suspended. So I think there's probably some connections to the state law we have to look at there.
You're correct, Mr. J.
Thank you, Dr. Marco, for the support. Appreciate that.
It seems like there's a lot of leeway in this. Is in the regulation more specific on? Okay. So there's not,
If you think about it, what you want to do, the goal of it all is to reduce the behaviors you're seeing and give them
Mhm.
time to kind of like ice out. But you don't want, you never really want to stop the learning, because then you don't want to ice their brain. That's a problem we're dealing with now with some issues. But we want to keep their brain warm, but their actions on ice. And also, I think the punishment comes in that kids really like that social connection. And so losing that social connection is going to be a part of that punishment. So I think if we can keep their brains active as much as possible, that's a good thing. So I'd advocate for us to keep the schoolwork component in there, however legally possible.
That's what I was wondering about the bus transportation, because I think if you suspend the bus transportation, and then you have parents that are working and they can't take them, I think it's for continued education and working on the issues. You want everybody to be safe, but I just think there's a balance as well. So.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that based on the brief discussion that we had, I think that word suspension will come up in our next conversation. Because no one wanted to change, I think, what we're actually doing in school. I think they want to make sure that what we're saying in the policy goes along with what we want to be doing in the schools. So I do think that's going to come up. Whether they're going to rename it, I don't know how that discussion is going to go, but that is going to come up in our next one.
Okay.
And again, the code of conduct talks about all of these things as well, as do the regulations. So I think one of the things that we as a group struggle with a little bit is, where does the policy end and the regulation? A lot of things that we're more concerned about, we hear from our kids and our staff, has more to do with a regulation, sometimes. So I think, but again, it all comes from the policy. So we need to make sure that what is in the policy is what needs to be there. And that's what's going to get carried out by your regulations and your codes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, perfect. Okay. Gonna stop presenting. Anything else on the policy discussion?
So just coming up, we are going to hopefully discuss the following at the next meeting also. 437, which is bullying. We've been waiting for that. 423, which is gang activity. And 439, which is dress code. Now, the dress code policy is already required to be reviewed every 2 years, so that is not super outdated, but it is time for its regular review. Those were in the first group of the four. Sorry.
Sorry, can you just say the numbers one more time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's 437, which is the one on bullying.
Okay.
423, which is gang activity.
Okay.
And 439, which was the dress code policy for students.
Okay.
The dress code is the one that is already required to be reviewed every 2 years. So that is not 20 years old, but it does come up every 2 years. The bullying and the gang activity were also in that first group of the 400s that were very old, which is why they're on the top of the list for the policy committee to discuss. So Mr. Blivis is going to put them on the agenda after he discusses the subject with our area experts within FCPS, and then it's going to start the discussion at the end of February on those.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. So that would be something for our committee to look at and read over and, see what we think about all of those things.
Okay, maybe we can. Is it okay, Sabrina, if we send that out by email, like with the grid? Or
Sure, and we can have, if we have a little bit of time left still, if you want to have open discussion, if anybody has any comments about any of those policies now, we can have a group discussion in regards to that.
okay. Let me see if I can find them and then share them.
I'm trying to remember when we divided things up, when we all went off to research our own. So John and I did copyright and we did something else. Student discipline was going to be next on our list, because that was one that we were excited to discuss. And I can't remember. I feel like we did have somebody to look at bullying and maybe gang activity, because again, those were the hot topics that sort of came up in our discussions of our priorities as a committee. Student behavior, student conduct, and things like that. So I know that I remember a discussion about bullying, and we talked about cyberbullying and the online component that really is not reflected. And I think that's going to be a really big discussion. And it'll probably take some time to sort through all of that.
Okay,
I had a question for the committee in general. Do we believe that, I think, looking at code of conduct or student behavior, I'm thinking about the AI policy. And actually, there has been some movement on that on the College Board level. I teach an AP course, and I was looking at my AP course requirements. They actually made some changes this year in terms of AI. You mentioned cyber. I know we also talked about AI. So would that live, you think, by itself somewhere, or would that possibly go into like our code of conduct for students? What do you guys think in general where that would live? Would it be because it's more broad for everybody? It would be something live by itself, or you think it would live in a student code of conduct policy? Do we have concerns on staff AI use? Is it going to just be something we think lives with students, or is it by itself?
Seems multi-layered to me.
mm-hmm.
Just putting out feelers, nothing concrete. Just picking your brains. Thank you for responding. Who was that?
That was well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree. I think there are a lot of. We started a discussion briefly, and I think there are other LEAs that do have cyberbullying and AI and things like that in their policies, and we don't have any AI in our policy at all right now. And I think over the past few years, the role of AI in our schools has evolved, and I think it does need to be included everywhere. I think it's got to be included in policy somewhere. And when we as a committee discussed the bullying policy, for example, I remember talking about this in our group. And at one of our nighttime meetings in person. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Margot. Dr. Margot.
I was just saying, as a cabinet, we had a discussion, when was it? Yesterday regarding AI. And I do believe there are board members that are very interested in pursuing a policy and regulations in the future regarding AI. So just wanted to give you that little caveat. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm glad
No.
it's being discussed everywhere. Like, that's super important. It's such a hot topic right now, and it's a really big thing everywhere. So
And that's going to be big in terms of like, I think another my thought came up about bullying, where like it might have like a, I don't know, we have links to policy that kind of connect. I think there might be an aspect there because with AI you can falsify statements, you can falsify images, and so that could be a part of bullying. I do think that like I said, like it's going to be talked about by board members, and also like Will said, it's a layered process. But I think also I wonder if just thinking about it out loud, I think bullying might have some caveat to it because of the ability to generate images, and so yeah, there's just that thought process.
I think social media just in general needs to be called out and addressed as part of this as well. I mean, it's all encompassing with AI, but
Yeah. Oh well, don't get me started on that one because I think honestly, I will say that nobody here, of course, but I'll say in terms of social media, I think one of the largest proponents of bullying I've seen on social media are parents to their children.
oh gosh,
I've seen a lot of parental shaming of children on the internet, and it's just sickening because what happens is like this kid's still developing, he's still growing, and they made a faux pas, and now instead of handling it at home, you put it out in the world. So when we get to the cyberbullying piece, I'm going to mention the parents too, because I think that's something we got to model what we want to see the kids do.
Mhm.
So
one
Is
of
there
the sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
One of the tricky things about the bullying, especially when we talk about cyberbullying and AI, is that a lot of that happens off of school grounds and not during school hours, right? So, something happens at 8 o'clock at night and something is distributed on a social media somewhere, but that does disrupt the flow of the educational day, and it affects the behavior and the events of the school day the next day. And so, yeah, does your school govern what happens at your house? No, but in these situations, it directly affects what happens at school during the school day. So I think, the technical piece with bullying, it's not just, things that happen in person now. So I think that's going to be a very layered discussion, I think.
it will be, as Will mentioned, but also like with the piece about at home versus school. Some of our policies, we actually have statements to parents about what we hope they aspire to. Like, you look at our homework policy, we ask parents to like try to provide an environment for kids to be able to flourish and do their homework and that kind of thing. And so I've made comments about homework policy in general, but just in that same vein of like what we hope the parents aspire to is put in policy. With AI and with technology and cyberbullying, I would ask the parents to model, to aspire to modeling the behavior we want to see at school, at home. You can put those aspirational goals in your policy and speaks to parents. So I think we can't make them do anything, but I think by stating that, character comes from home, it kind of puts that out there that we're looking for that as well. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, is there anything else on this one? What was the other one, Celeste?
423 was gang activity. And that is also coming up. Thank you.
Welcome. This one seems pretty straightforward. Anyone have any suggestions or comments?
We don't want to see it in our schools. I'll say that.
Yep.
And
Well, like I said, that'll be the, an intro discussion at our next one. So I'll bring back the discussion. And some of these that we're looking at are pretty straightforward. And sometimes we, think a sentence or two needs to be changed and updated to kind of make it more reflect what we're talking about today versus when it was written. But there may not be a lot on that one. I don't know. So I'm curious to see what comes up at the next meeting.
Okay. And then what was the dress code?
Yep, 439.
Oh, there we go. I really like this statement because I think a lot of dress codes tend to heavily lean towards female students. So
I mean, just reading over it, I feel like it is pretty straightforward. I can't think of anything that I think is missing. I think a lot of times the issues that parents and other students and staff may have is how it is followed. Like I know one of our schools recently, I was just reading number 11, students may be restricted from wearing an item of clothing or article which impedes their ability to be fully engaged and participate. It was blankets, and they had to send messages home. Please do not allow your kids to bring blankets to school because, and I mean, we're in Walkersville. The buildings are very old. It is either 100 degrees or 50 degrees. It's, and so my guys wear layers to school every day. Like their uniform is sweatshirt, t-shirt, extra sweatshirt. I mean, usually 2 sweatshirts and a tee, and it is hot or cold, and some rooms are really cold, but kids were wearing blankets and putting them over their heads, and so they had to come out and be like, please do not let your children bring blankets to school. And so that's a good example of that number 11 up there, which I would never have imagined, but then I saw the letter and I asked Mike, I'm like, do people do that? And they said, oh yeah. So I don't think they do it anymore.
So are there schools that have uniforms? Or what is this section for?
Heather Ridge used to have uniforms. I think they discontinued the uniforms. And I'm not sure of our charter schools. I want to say the classical school has
Okay.
uniforms, but I don't believe our Montessori or Sevillesville does.
Okay.
I believe the standard uniform for kids now currently is Crocs and sweatshirt, I believe.
Pretty standard.
And pajama pants.
I do see a lot of those.
Mhm. This seems like this should be two separate policies. I feel like like one dress code and one uniform. I don't.
Well, I had not read it yet, so I was surprised to see the whole section on the establishing a uniform.
Yeah, this feels like a lot. Does anybody want me to go to a particular section?
I believe something that was brought up previously in our discussion was about the derogatory, I guess, policies under policy statement number 4, talking about the derogatory expression or language demeaning an identifiable person, and kind of and looking at possible definitions. What does that mean? Because that can mean different things to different people. I think that was brought up in our discussions previously.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Like defining derogatory expressions or language, like specifically, what does that mean?
Yes, because some people feel that some things are derogatory while others do not. So what is the definition of that so it's consistent across the schools?
And I guess you might have to define an identifiable person or group. I mean, they have examples in there, but I don't know how specific you want to drill down on that. That would be, because you're right. Some people are offended by some things and some people are not. And so how do you, I think it needs to be a little more clear in that policy.
It could be simply just something that's pointed and targeted and just like negative, like, beat this or down with that, kind of like if anything, kind of like anything that could be considered like slander or like hate speech or anything like maybe if we put like concrete rules in the law, those are probably easier to get standardized.
Okay. Anything else? And that's the last one, Celeste?
Yes, that's the last one. Along with going back to the ones that we had talked about before.
Okay. Alrighty.
Yep. I'm just double checking. We're good.
Okay.
It'll be a full agenda, I think, for February.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sabrina. I had like 8 things open, so I was like, where's that? Okay, for recruitment of new members, do we want to talk about that now? I think.
Yes. I think we do.
Yeah. Okay.
It's too bad we lost the two potential members
I know.
in the discussion.
Maybe they'll come back.
I think, were we going to get more information about what that would look like? Kind of next steps for that?
I think we just we have documentation we've sent out before to get you folks. So I think we just kind of put that back out on the rafters, on the waivers. Maybe what we can do is we can have staff send us back what we put out there. I forget exactly what it was, and we want to tweak it a little bit. Just kind of look at what we sent out last time and tweak that and just say, okay, could you please send it out? So I don't know if we can get public affairs to send us what we would put out last time, and we can look at it as a group to get that back before us to kind of look at it one more time. And if we like it, send it back to public affairs and then push it out.
Would we want to try and get this done before, I guess, May? Or
Yeah. So
wait until September.
I feel like we can get it done before. I think we can get it done. So I think the sooner the better, because we want to make sure we have we kind of keep the thing going. So yeah, you folks have been like awesome. I don't know if you guys are running out of steam, so we got to put some seeds in the ground so you guys can lead them forward. So that Dr. Marco, could it be possible us to get public affairs to send us what they have from last time that we put out there?
Absolutely. I'll take care of it this week.
Thank you.
That actually came from Catherine Rich.
Okay.
So it's not from Public Affairs. So Catherine can have that sent to us for the recruitment because it comes through the board.
Sabrina, would you mind following up with Catherine on that?
Absolutely. I'll
I
take
know
care of
you-
that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cool.
And it does take some time because once we approve or we recommend who we would like to approve, it also has to go to the board for the board approval. So if we start the process soon, that implementation may not occur until May sometime.
And the board's disjointed now too, so they're we're kind of disembodied. So it might be even, it's good to get it going.
So I'll have information from Catherine for the next meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then next, any open comments or discussion for future board meeting assignments? Sounds like next time we'll be talking about the recruitment of new members, and then we can do policy updates from the meeting that Celeste had end of February. Anything else?
Throw this out there. I didn't realize until more recently that it's actually a state either a policy or a requirement. Don't want to throw around the word policy too much, but to actually have a citizens advisory council in their LEAs. And so I did a little bit of research just to kind of see what other citizens advisory councils in other counties do. And it was kind of interesting. I couldn't really get a good feel for what they do, but I'm starting to dig into a couple of those. I just think it's interesting to see like how do other councils that are, operating under the same charge that we're operating under, but what do they do? And some are linked to policy a little bit. Some are just more like a focus group for different things. Some get assigned different research topics from the Board of Ed. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there during open discussion. If anyone's curious about if I had any nights free, it'd be fun to like go and sit in on another one just to kind of see what our colleagues are doing out there. I don't have any free nights like at all, but if I did, it would be really interesting, I think, just to go meet them and, hey, what are you doing? How did you get here? So anyway, there's, the agendas are all public. The minutes are not as easy to find as agendas, but you can find them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I thought I'd just throw that out there if you have a little time.
Thank you for sharing that.
Celeste, I can share with you that previous Frederick County CAC members attended, I want to say, Washington County CAC meeting. I also had the pleasure to serve on the CAC in Washington County in a previous lifetime. And that CAC dealt with hot topics in the community. So if something was bubbling up, we typically brought in staff and shared information about how we're addressing it. And then the community members or the CAC members could then take that back out to their constituents. So that's been my experience with CAC. You're exactly right. They function very differently from district to district.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, though. Are there any other? What are the other counties that have CACs? Is it
It's required by COMAR. So every
everybody?
of our 24 school districts in the state of Maryland, every district should have a CAC based on COMAR. Now, how districts have interpreted what a CAC should do and what their function should be, I've found it differs from district to district.
Okay.
And I wonder if they might have a slightly different name. So like Calvert County has a Citizens Advisory Committee. Anne Arundel County is also under the name committee, but Citizens Advisory. Talbot County also has one, and Harford County. So those are the 4 that popped up that I was able to kind of dig into a little bit. I must have been waiting for somebody to finish a music lesson or something. But anyway, those are the ones that popped up pretty easily when I was just doing a search in Maryland just to see what people do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Anybody else have anything? Alrighty. So I think that's it. The next meeting is April 16th at 7:00.
Do we have it? We don't have a May date yet.
Let me check. I'm not sure if we do or not. Give me just a moment. But our April meeting will be virtual because the boardroom will not be completed by that point.
Okay. Perfect.
So just double checking on I have here. I have us down meeting again April 16th.
Yep.
Okay.
At 7:00 virtually. I don't think Sabrina intended to leave. I feel like she said when she was going to go check, she meant.
She may check out, I guess.
Yeah, she was like, bye, I'm going to go look for that. See you next time. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
So I guess you can adjourn this. Then.
Thank you.
Are we adjourned?
Yep, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, you guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Night.
Night.